So this is the hot cross bun of thoughts and feelings and behaviours. If you've had any CBT therapy, you may be familiar with this, and this shows us how our mind and body's reactions to stress can influence our behaviours and lead to us developing unhealthy lifestyles. So any situation that we find ourselves in, we will have a thought about it. We will think in a certain way. So the example that's given you is nobody likes me, or I always mess things up. Now, any thought we have, that will trigger an emotion or a feeling. So if somebody's thinking like that, they may feel sad, they may feel self-conscious, or they may feel anxious. And that happens in an instant. And any feeling or emotion that we get will show up in the body somewhere as a physical reaction, as we learned in the last module. So if you were feeling sad, self-conscious and anxious, so your bodily reaction may be feeling tense, you may be having palpitations, maybe feeling like drained and not having any energy. And those three things, they happen in an instant. So it's triggered by the amygdala and happens instantly. And it's our mind's way of helping to keep us safe. And these things all go on internally, and it doesn't feel very good, does it? It can make us feel really sort of unwell, can't it? And when we don't feel good on the inside, we look for something on the outside to make ourselves feel better. And at this point, we usually just react and look for something to soothe our emotions, to calm down those bodily reactions and make ourselves generally feel better. And for me, going back in the past, when I felt anxious, I always would feel it in two places, either in my stomach, and not as a feeling of running back and forth to the toilet or feeling sick, but I used to feel there was a ball in my stomach, and the more I'd think about the thing that made me anxious, I'd feel that ball actually tightening. And I'd also feel it in the tendons of my arms as well. And the way it would affect me is I'd feel like the tendons in my arms were being tightened. And my reaction to that was eating cake and biscuits. And the first time I ate cake and biscuits as an emotional sort of reaction, it was almost like that aha moment. I could feel everything sort of settling down. I could feel the tendons in my arms loosening. And what happens then when we do something once and it makes ourselves feel better, the next time we experience those feelings and those bodily reactions, we do the same thing, don't we? So they become our behaviours. And for me, my behaviour was two things: either eating sugar, or I'd take myself off to bed. And at certain times in my life when things were really, really stressful, if I took myself off to bed, I didn't have to think about things that were worrying me, and I became somebody that overslept. And we tend to, some of the behaviours that we do tend to either go to one extreme or another. So some people might not be able to sleep, some people might oversleep. And our behaviours might be things like withdrawing from other people, or even just stopping doing things that we enjoy. So the key, and then what happens then, we do that behaviour, and then we'll have a thought about that behaviour. So when I'd have all this sugar, and in the short term, it helped, but longer term, I had much longer consequences, because I ended up putting on 5 stone in weight. And then as I'm still eating the sugar and putting weight on, my thought then go to, oh, why did I have that? Why didn't I just go and meditate? And then I'd have feelings of guilt. And then this is when it becomes then a vicious circle. And then you go round and round and round this hot cross bun. And as you can see, going through the middle, you have a thought, you may notice the bodily sensations, you have the feelings, and then may do a behaviour to like soothe those emotions. And these can go round and round and back and forth. So is it any wonder why we can really, really struggle with these? But the key is about noticing, and what I tend to find, I notice the bodily reaction first. Your experience may be different. So because through mindfulness, I've got to know my bodily reactions to stress very, very well. And I know now that if I'm feeling anxious, I'll have this reaction in my stomach or in my arms. And if I notice that I'm having that reaction, and I only get this when I'm anxious, I don't get it at any other time, I'll notice that, and then I'll think, oh, right, I must be feeling anxious about something. So I'll go back then, okay, and think, right, my thoughts must have changed, because I can hand on heart, honestly say that every single time that I've kind of hit rock bottom, it has started with a thought and started with me thinking negatively about a situation. And it's almost like I've got to a point that when I start thinking negatively, I can almost feel my energy levels sort of dropping straight away. So when I notice I'm thinking negatively, then I can do something with those thoughts. I can either reframe them, or it might be a situation I can actually do something about, and that'll make me feel better about it. So this is really, really key to managing our mental health and well-being. And then what we tend to do when we come to having all of that going on internally, we tend to react. And the way we react is by looking for something to either block things out, or a sense of like drowning our emotions, or soothing our emotions, drowning them out. The ways that we do that are different for everybody. It might be that somebody might smoke more. It might be that somebody might have an extra glass of wine in the evenings. Me, it was sugar. It might be that somebody might take a bit of extra pain medication, withdrawing, throwing yourselves into exercise, throwing yourselves into work, isolating yourselves. It can be overeating or undereating, not moving or moving too much. It can be things like throwing yourself into social media, retail therapy. All those sorts of things are all things that we seek out to either block things out and avoid having to deal with the uncomfortable emotions, or drowning them out and soothing them so that to make ourselves feel better. And I'm not here to sort of tell you not to have that extra glass of wine in the evenings, or that type of thing. It's just about being aware of this. And it's about the intention behind it. I mean, if you were having, a social glass of wine in the evening, it can really help us to wind down, can't it? But if the intention behind it is to block things out and avoid, then it's worth thinking about, okay, what's going on here? And as I said, some of these things can help in the short term, but longer term we can end up with more difficult life situations or challenges then that causes us more problems. Can cause problems in our relationships, and it can cause problems in us perhaps being able to go to work, and then it becomes a spiral. Then it can spiral out to control, can't it? And this can be quite tough. And there was something else I was going to say to you then, and it's just slipped my mind. I was going to tell you something else then, and this might be a good point to mention, that I've got a fibromyalgia diagnosis, and one of the ways that it affects me is losing my train of thought, or can't think of a word, and sometimes it'll come back and sometimes it won't, and that has literally just happened. No, it's not coming back. Oh, yes it is. Yes it is. Some of the ways that we react might be things like that you might view as being quite positive, things like going to the gym, becoming active. And yes, that has a massive impact on our mental health and well-being. But if that then becomes addictive and we end up over-exercising, then it can become a problem. Throwing yourself into work can have positive consequences, but somebody can become a workaholic. Even things like reading, scrolling through social media. If we do anything to excess, or we underdo anything, that's when they can become a problem. So when we're thinking about those thoughts, there is a saying that what you focus on grows, and what you think about expands, and what you dwell on determines your destiny. And it ties in with the hot cross bun of emotions. So often what people will do when you have a thought, they'll try and push it away, try to avoid it, try to drown it out, block it out. But once it's in your mind, it's there. The key thing is about how we feed that thought. So if we are focusing all of our energy, or our attention is all on that thought, and we just are thinking about it and ruminating on it, it's going to grow and grow and grow. And those thoughts then can determine our actions and our behaviours. So if we are having thoughts like, I'm no good at this bringing up feelings of like self-consciousness, and it's feeling sick, our behaviours can be that we actually limit ourselves and hold ourselves back. And It can mean that we won't go for that job interview, or we become socially isolated. So they can really shape what our lives end up looking like. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about our thoughts. We've talked about the bodily sense. When we think back to the hot cross bun of thoughts, feelings and bodily sensations, we've talked quite a lot about the bodily sensations. So we're now going to talk about thoughts. So we all have thoughts in response to a particular situation, but what tends to happen to us is we tend to get caught up in ruminating over thoughts and ruminating over past experiences. And it's a bit like cows that chew the cud. What they do is when they chew grass, they swallow it down and they bring it back up. And it sounds vile, you know. They chew over it again, it goes back down, bring it back up, and they chew over it again. And we tend to do, or we can do this with our thoughts. So we can have a situation, we can have a thought about it, and we might try and bury it, or we might try and not pay attention, and it might go deep down, but then it comes back up again. And then we might push it back down again, and it comes back up again. Push it back down again, and it comes back up again. And often it comes back up, don't know, when we're trying to get to sleep and those type of things, and we can get really caught up in ruminating. And ruminating can like really drain our energy, and is what can lead to depression. And it tends to be, when we ruminate over things, it tends to be things that have happened in the past. And this can be one of our reasons that we suffer. One of the things when we're talking about thoughts that is worth doing a brief overview on is our thoughts. When we think things over and over, they become our unhelpful thinking styles, and these are what can become our limiting beliefs. Now, these are quite in depth, and this is a whole other session, so I'm just going to touch on them very briefly, because it is something that's worth paying attention to. So the first one is emotional reasoning. So that is assuming that because we feel a certain way, then that's true. So because we feel bad, that something must be bad. Overgeneralizing, so we might say things like, I'm never any good at this. And it might be, it's just once you didn't do something very well, but I'm rubbish at this. So we think that we're rubbish at everything. Labeling, assigning labels to ourselves or other people, so calling people stupid, telling ourselves that we're rubbish, that type of thing. Jumping to conclusions, assuming that we know what is going to happen, or so this might tie into maybe we've got a social event to go to, and we'll tell ourselves, I know it's going to be bad. I know everybody's going to be looking at me. So we jump into conclusion, but we don't actually know that, do we? Magnification or catastrophizing and minimization. So this might be that you go into a social event and you're feeling a little bit anxious, so you'll start telling yourself that you're going to be nervous walking in, and then one thought will lead to another. You're going to be nervous walking in, nobody's going to talk to me, I'm going to be sat on my own, I'm going to be embarrassed, I'm just going to be staring. Before you know it, the thought has escalated and escalated. We talk ourselves out of doing things, or we might minimize things, and this can tie in with somebody gives us a compliment, we minimize it, or if we do something well, we'll be like, oh yeah, or sometimes somebody say to us things like, oh, hair's lovely today, oh, I haven't even washed it this morning. We'll minimize things. Our mental filter. So the things that we tell ourselves become our mental filters, or the things that have been said to us become our mental filter. So if over the years we've been told that we're rubbish, we will, everything that we do, we will perceive it through a mental filter of I'm rubbish. So if you have come to believe that over the years, you're going to go for an interview, you've already told yourself, I'm going to fail at this because I'm rubbish. That's our mental filter. Disqualifying the positive, so discounting anything positive that might be going on. So other people might be saying things to us like, oh, look how well this is happening, and you just dismiss it. You just won't even recognise or unwilling to look at any positive things. All or nothing thinking is, it's either black and white, there's no halfway in the middle. You can only either see the bad things or the good things, and no sort of grey area. Personalisation is assuming the blame for things and assuming that you were responsible for things that perhaps go wrong, or for other people. And probably the worst words in the English language. Should and musts, and these cause us so many problems. How often do we say to ourselves, oh, I should be losing weight, I should be going to the gym? Where is it in the rule book that says you should be doing it? Oh, I must do this, I must do that. And we can hold ourselves to really, really high expectations by telling ourselves these things. So when you are noticing your thoughts, it's worth noticing, okay, what type of thought is this? Am I jumping to conclusions? Am I thinking negatively? Am I telling myself I should do this? And then you can change your thought around a bit. And then something that's worth asking yourself is, if you're noticing that you are catastrophizing, for example, then challenging yourself and saying, what evidence do I have that this is going to turn out badly? What evidence do I have? And if there isn't any evidence, then you can try and change that thought. And when we change the thought, when we think back to the hot cross bun, if your thought is more positive, you'll have a different feeling and a different bodily reaction. And then chances are we'll have a different behaviour. So there is a lot more to this, but this is worth dropping in and making you aware of. Now, we do have an automatic negativity bias. When we think back to fight or flight, if we didn't have an automatic negativity bias, we are programmed to think negatively. When we were in that jungle, and if we were just stopping and thinking, oh, there's a lovely pear tree, that's beautiful, oh, the chances are we're going to get eaten by that tiger creeping up on us. So there's a reason why we've got a negativity bias. We do have positive thoughts, but our brain holds on to the negative thoughts to keep us safe. So we have something like 80,000 thoughts a day. And it's unrealistic to think that all of those are going to be negative. We do have positive thoughts, but they just tend to come into our awareness and flow back out again. The negative ones come in and we tend to hold on to them because our mind is trying to remind us of these things to keep us safe. So there is a saying that our brains are like Velcro to negativity, it sticks, and Teflon to positivity. So we have to work a lot harder to notice positive thoughts than what we do with negative ones.